Hello, America, and to our friends around the world, greetings and welcome back. This one got my attention. This was uh, S2 Underground on his November 17 wire. Included this one from the New York Post. Coast Guard rescues father, son after the boat capsizes during rough weather. All right, what makes this significant and newsworthy? This comes out of the Pacific Northwest, and if you're not familiar, the Columbia River Bar is considered the most dangerous river to ocean transition in the world. That might be an exaggeration. I'm not a sailor, but I've crossed the bar on multiple occasions, and I I am benefited that motion sickness is not a thing for me. I've known plenty of people who are dropping their head over the rails or in the head or anywhere, spilling their guts. They couldn't get enough Dramamine in their systems and to ease their stomach. I remember one time crossing the bar and my butt on the counter, legs stretched across the walkway, and perched on the back of a chair and fallen asleep, dropping 30 feet and climbing back up 50 feet and down 60 feet, crossing the bar. uh, this is amazing, people. You have no idea what treachery is until you've dealt with the ocean or dealt with a crossing such as the Columbia River. Decades ago, I'm I met a woman who was a bar pilot. A bar pilot, if you're not familiar, is a designated term for the individual who takes command of a vessel and pilots it in to a specific area. You know, sometimes you can't use a tug. You got to use it's got to go under its own power. The vessel has to go under its own power. So these larger vessels, for example, Astoria is a port of entry. Yeah, or not maybe not a port of entry, but it is the mouth of the Columbia. It's where international trade enters and exits, making its way from Astoria all the way apparently to ports in Idaho. I don't know how they do that with the various dams and locks along the way, but I saw something about Idaho being considered a port, but I don't want to get lost in that right now. The point is Portland made it anchored itself to the northwest and became the paramount city of Oregon due to the Columbia River. In the mid 90s, there was a gigantic flood that destroyed a lot of property in the region and spilled into the Columbia. And for a period of time, you could see flotsam, debris from people's properties, furniture, parts of buildings, dead animals, floating the Columbia. And in the harbor area in Astoria, you saw dozens of vessels anchored because they couldn't travel any further because of all the debris that had been making its way down the river. And then you go to the Astor Column and you look out in the ocean and you saw dozens upon dozens more vessels waiting their turn to be piloted in because the pilots could only bring in one vessel at a time or something, and had limited space. Now, if you've been to Astoria to Tongue Point, the Astoria Megler Bridge, that's a 4 mile crossing, that Astoria Megler Bridge from Oregon, Astoria, Oregon to Washington. Now, where these people came from that were rescued was out of a place called Chinook, Washington, which is along the highway on your way to sleeping, or not sleeping, but fishing communities such as Ilwaco, or vacation destinations such as Long Beach. But going back to the woman that I knew, when I lived and worked in the Astoria area, I met this bar pilot that came in to where I worked on a frequent basis. She had written a book, something called "The Captain Is a Woman" or something to that effect. Uh, anyway, I'm not going to say anything disparaging about her because uh, she'd gone through some hard events in her life and was very, very guarded. But in the course of talking to her, she lowered her guard and became much more friendly and approachable and conversant. Uh, but yeah, she said it was nothing for the her and the other bar pilots to go out in a little boat at 2 in the morning. A little boat, with what, 3 people, 4 people, maybe. Uh, when I say little boat, I mean, like 15, 20 foot, and go out, leaving Astoria, crossing the bar at 2 in the morning, and go out into the Pacific Ocean, get up alongside this ocean vessel, and then climb what, 60 feet? The 60-foot ladder, middle of January, 2 in the morning, to pilot this cargo vessel across the bar. The Coast Guard station had a very unique uh, rescue device. It was an encapsulated life raft. Think Star Wars, that moment when R2D2 and C3PO escape, and land on the desert planet of Tatooine. That's what this thing with the Coast Guard was. It was round. It looked, it was bright orange. It was ribbed, but it was a giant Tylenol pill. It was a capsule. It was an emergency escape capsule. And the reason it was ribbed and the reason it was, round as a Tylenol pill, a prescription pill, was so that it wouldn't sink. So it would always be buoyant. Or at least I think that's what the guy told me. I had a ex brother-in-law who was stationed at that uh, facility. In fact, that Coast Guard facility has the Astoria Airport, and it's in Warrenton, not Astoria. You go across the Youngs Bay Bridge to Warrenton in order to get to the airport and Coast Guard station. That airport is where I did my first airplane flight with the flight manager there, John something or another. That was a long, long time ago. But all right, so let's get back into this. This is the reason it got my attention. So I'm glad S2 Underground put this out there. How he gets his information, I'm not certain. I'm presuming it's ham radio information, collated and collected. Father and son spent 2 hours clinging to their overturned vessel before they were saved. Officials said that a family member reported them missing after they didn't return home when they were expected. The U.S. Coast Guard MH-60 Jayhawk helicopter crew from Astoria left the base shortly after they received the call. Within hours, the rescue crew was able to locate the pair in the middle of the ocean, huddled together while they barely hung on to the boat. The Coast Guard team hoisted the family members safely to the aircraft. We have both survivors in the cabin, said a Coast Guard officer. I'm going to play the video footage for you here in a moment, and you can hear and watch what all went down. But yeah, Coast Guard Station Astoria is of a vital importance to the local area. The bar pilots are of vital importance, and the treachery and dangers of the bar is underrated. I mean, it is thought to be the most dangerous, but it is underrated, because people still cross it and still get into accidents. So let me finish up the article and then I'll put you on to the video. Once secured, emergency personnel carefully buckled the survivors into their seats. The video showed a man shaking in the corner while a crew member helps him with his harness. Crew member later noted over the radio that the pair remained quite cold, so they were working on turning on the heat to help them, but they would be back on land shortly. The survivors were then flown to an awaiting emergency medical services where they were treated for hypothermia. When I was in the military, I had an opportunity to do an exchange with the Navy and participate in water survival. Went through the helo dunker, was blindfolded, put in a giant steel drum that had cut out windows. There weren't any glass; it was just holes where windows would normally be. It had seat belts. It had a crew compartment and a passenger compartment. We were blindfolded, suspended above the pool, approximately 20-25 feet. It dropped, and our instructions were to wait until it had fully rotated underwater, meaning water running up your nose as you're hanging upside down before you release your safety belt and exit the aircraft. And the reason this is done was to protect yourself from the rotating blades that were still rotating and would pull you under. And I went through that. I went through the airplane crash survival using a Heeds bottle and the hoist, where the lanyard is dropped into the water. You have to sweep it, hook it to yourself, and get pulled up. Escape from the parachute, all that fun stuff. All right, so here's the video.
We have both survivors in the cabin. Both survivors in the cabin will be recovering swimmer and heading to Astoria. We'll be on deck in approximately 10 minutes. Request ambulance standing by, hypothermia.
Alright, roger. Just kind of getting everything situated back here. They're both in their seats. They're pretty cold, so you can crank the heat.
063 sector, copy. The EMS has been briefed and they will be there when you arrive over.
Hey, we really appreciate you guys. Good job tonight.
Yeah, helicopter perseverance. I know you're really busy right now. Are we far enough away where we can keep our lights on right here?
Yeah, they're fine. Yeah, you guys are doing great. We just have to recover the swimmer, and then we're going to be out of here, guys. We got the survivors in the aircraft. Thanks for the work tonight. Thanks for the help, you guys. We have both survivors in the cabin. Both survivors in the cabin will be recovering swimmer and heading to Astoria. We'll be on deck in approximately 10 minutes. Request ambulance standing by, hypothermia.
Alright, roger. Just kind of getting everything situated back here. They're both in their seats. They're pretty cold, so you can crank the heat.
063 sector, copy. The EMS has been briefed and they will be there when you arrive over.
Hey, we really appreciate you guys. Good job tonight.
Yeah, helicopter perseverance. I know you're really busy right now. Are we far enough away where we can keep our lights on right here?
Yeah, they're fine. Yeah, you guys are doing great. We just have to recover the swimmer, and then we're going to be out of here, guys. We got the survivors in the aircraft. Thanks for the work tonight. Thanks for the help, you guys.